On December 17th, 1959, Stanley Kramer's star-studded adaptation of Nevil Shute's best-selling novel, On the Beach, premiered in 18 theaters across all 7 continents. Attended by both heads of state and Hollywood royalty alike, the film was met with mixed reviews and made a steep loss at the box office. Despite this, On the Beach retains a cult following, notable for its poignant imagery, anti-nuclear messaging, and recognition of Australia as the perfect dystopian destination. In this video, I'll explore the creation of On the Beach, how it differs from Nevil Shute's original novel, and how this resulted in a compelling yet controversial addition to the catalogue of late 1950s cinema. British-born novelist and aeronautical engineer Nevil Shute published On the Beach in 1957, 7 years after relocating to the suburb of Langwarrin in Melbourne, Australia. The plot takes place in the near-distant future of 1964 and documents the experiences of a group of people residing in Melbourne as they await their impending demise from nuclear fallout. The book was an immediate success, striking a chord in the midst of the Cold War where the threat of the atomic bomb weighed heavily upon public consciousness. As Shute's novel climbed to the top of the bestseller list, the story was picked up by director Stanley Kramer, best known for his socially conscious filmmaking as displayed in 1958's The Defiant Ones, and most famously in 1967's Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. According to an article published by the New York Times on September 9, 1957, Kramer stated that, "This is by far the most important story that I have ever found, and, from the standpoint of the motion picture industry, it is my personal feeling that our future depends on motion pictures of this caliber." To tell Shute's story, Kramer enlisted the help of screenwriters John Paxton and James Lee Barrett, and the star power of some of Hollywood's most prominent talent. The decision was made to cast Gregory Peck and Ava Gardner in the leading roles as ill-fated lovers Commander Dwight Towers and Moira Davidson. A pre-Norman Bates Anthony Perkins, then primarily considered a teen idol, was cast as Lieutenant Peter Holmes, and 19-year-old newcomer Donna Anderson was chosen to play his wife Mary. But perhaps the most interesting choice was coaxing the semi-retired Fred Astaire, best known for his dancing and comedic roles, into his first dramatic role as scientist Julian Osborne. As for the decision to shoot in Australia, Kramer's widow Karen Sharp would state in the 2013 documentary Fallout, which I highly recommend if you're interested in a more in-depth look at the socio-political context of On the Beach, that Stanley wanted to be authentic, and there's nothing that authentic about a backlot. In May 1958, members of the production team were sent to Melbourne to scope out possible filming locations. Initial arrangements secured various locations in the city of Melbourne and at the nearby port town of Williamstown. Further locations later viewable in the film included Mount Eliza, Phillip Island, the suburb of Berwick, and the suburb of Frankston.
You live in Melbourne?
Just outside, actually, sir, in Frankston.
The arrival of cast and crew in the scorching summer heat of January 1959 ignited a media frenzy which lasted over the 2-month duration of filming. Newspapers would publish daily lists of filming locations, encouraging Melburnians to flock to set in the attempt to catch a glimpse of the biggest stars to have ever been spotted in the city. Many locals even took part in the production as extras, including members of the Royal Australian Navy. The press revelled in reporting on the movements of the cast, and particularly enjoyed hounding Ava Gardner, who was known for her outspoken and rowdy behaviour. "Melbourne is the perfect place to make a film about the end of the world," she allegedly said, though this quote was later revealed to be the satirical fabrication of journalist Neil Gillett writing for the Sydney Morning Herald. Still, this sentiment speaks to a deeply rooted artistic relationship between Australia and the apocalypse, which On the Beach helped bring to the world stage. A more in-depth look at this phenomenon is explored in Rosalind Weaver's Apocalypse in Australian Fiction and Film, A Critical Study, which provides a comprehensive overview of the theme of the apocalypse in Australian speculative fiction, from On the Beach to the Mad Max film franchise. On the Beach runs just shy of 2 hours and 15 minutes. Despite being the golden age of Technicolor, the film was shot in black and white, a fitting aesthetic choice which complements the serious subject matter. The picture opens with an orchestral rendition of Waltzing Matilda, a recurring motif which won composer Ernest Gold a Golden Globe for Best Original Score. The audience is first introduced to the character of Peter Holmes, played by Perkins, a young lieutenant in the Royal Australian Navy and loving husband and father to his wife Mary Anderson and their infant daughter. Interestingly, Perkins is the only main cast member who attempts an Australian accent, and I guess it's not too bad.
That's a term I don't like.
When an American nuclear submarine, the Sawfish, arrives in Melbourne, Peter is assigned liaison to the ship's captain, Commander Dwight Towers, played by Peck. Peter soon invites Dwight to a party at his home, which is met with some reluctance by Mary, who is worried Towers will be reminded of his own deceased children and wife. More importantly, she is worried the gathering will result in unpleasant discussions surrounding the circumstances at hand. Scientists are unsure when deathly radiation spreading from an unnamed atomic conflict will reach Australia. When stepping off the train at Frankston Station en route to the Holmes household, Dwight runs into Moira Davidson, the self-described town drunk who Peter invites to keep Dwight company. At the party, the two become further acquainted, the beginnings of a tentative romance which would anger Neville Shute, but more on that later. Here we meet our final key player, Astaire's cynical nuclear scientist Julian Osborne, who drunkenly argues with a fellow partygoer, blaming the recent conflict on scientists like him. When Mary walks in on Julian declaring that everyone is doomed, she exits the room crying. Whilst the central storyline of On the Beach focuses on the doomed relationship between Dwight and Moira, it is arguably Mary's struggle to accept her impending fate, and Peter's gentle attempts to navigate this, which carry the emotional weight of the film. Still, Gardner's somehow both weary and wide-eyed portrayal of Moira, a lonely woman desperate for human connection in the face of the end, is incredibly touching. The statuesque brunette, in her late 30s at the time of filming, is a far cry from the Moira depicted in Shute's novel, a 20-something blonde. Yet this deviation in Moira and Dwight's ages, contrasted with the younger Peter and Mary, is effective in reminding the audience that nobody will be spared from the fallout. Not even children, or the elderly. As Dwight and Moira grow closer, naval communications pick up on a mysterious Morse code signal coming from San Diego. In the hope that there are somehow survivors in America, Dwight is tasked to take the Sawfish, accompanied by Peter and Julian and the rest of the crew, to investigate. Worried that fallout will hit Melbourne before his return, Peter acquires suicide pills designed to be taken once radiation sickness sets in. In what is one of the most emotionally charged scenes in the film, Peter explains to Mary what she must do if she starts to feel unwell. The night before the Sawfish sets off, Moira and Dwight go for a late-night stroll along a busy Melbourne street. Moira cautiously expresses her feelings toward Dwight, however, he remains committed to his late wife. Met with rejection, she seeks comfort in Julian. In another deviation from the novel, where the two are depicted as cousins, we learn the pair are former lovers. Then 60 years old, and looking every bit of it, Astaire's Julian carries a wiser air than the much younger man in Shute's novel. Though he retains a love of fast cars, Julian predominantly serves as the film's expository mouthpiece and philosophical guide, delivering numerous haunting dialogue for which Astaire received a Golden Globe nomination for Best Supporting Actor.
The war started when people accepted the idiotic principle that peace could be maintained by arranging to defend themselves with weapons they couldn't possibly use without committing suicide.
One of the most memorable scenes in the film occurs when the Sawfish arrives in San Francisco, passing under an empty Golden Gate Bridge. Each man proceeds to take turns viewing the unnervingly quiet city through a periscope. Whilst the crew are distracted, a San Fran native escapes the submarine and proceeds to swim ashore, choosing to die of radiation sickness in his hometown rather than down under. After arriving in San Diego, a crew member is sent on shore wearing a radiation suit in the attempt to locate the source of the mysterious Morse code. The source is found to be a Coke bottle fallen on a transmitting key, sending out gibberish when rocked by the wind. Back in Melbourne, Dwight is reunited with Moira at her father's farm, and Peter promises Mary he will never leave her again. Having restored an old Ferrari, Julian chooses to compete in the final Australian Grand Prix and emerges victorious whilst numerous competitors perish in fiery wrecks. Spectating the event, Dwight suggests to Moira that the two of them go to the mountains for a few days because the trout season has been moved up. This is followed by the most contentious scene of the film, at least from Shute's perspective. After a day of fishing, Dwight and Moira enjoy a private romantic dinner in their hotel room, as drunken revelers sing Waltzing Matilda in the bar downstairs. A violent gust of wind blows the windows open, and after scrambling to close it, Dwight offers to light the fire. The chorus of discordant voices reduced to a single rendition of the final verse of the folk song, a haunting lament. At first the lovers pause, before falling into a passionate embrace. On the Beach is subtle in depicting the progression of Dwight and Moira's relationship, even by 1950 standards. However, this insinuated consummation of their love was a major source of tension between Shute and Kramer. Interestingly, Shute had initially collaborated with Kramer on the film, despite having previously held little interest in how his novels were translated to screen. However, for reasons unclear, Shute was markedly possessive toward On the Beach, and angered not only by the perceived Americanization of his novel through the casting of American actors, but by Dwight's unfaithfulness to his dead wife, which both Shute and Peck argued was a central aspect of the character. Whilst Shute's protectiveness over his characters is more than understandable, especially when considering he was growing increasingly ill at the time and that he perhaps believed the novel would be his final work, Kramer's decision to fully realize Dwight and Moira's relationship was ultimately the right choice if the director wanted his film and its bleak anti-nuclear messaging to have any chance at appealing to American audiences. In the novel, Dwight's unwavering loyalty to his dead wife inspires Moira to be a better person and speaks to the text's major theme that the inevitability of death should not prevent one from living a meaningful life. But in the first part of the film, this loyalty honestly reads as more unhinged than moral. Fortunately, Dwight eventually relents to Moira's charm, but their relationship is not just a Hollywood fabrication capitalizing on Peck and Gardner's chemistry to satisfy audiences, but a plotline which embodies one of the film's strongest messages, that love is the root of the human condition, a light which can endure in the darkest of moments. This notion is especially apparent during the film's final scenes. After returning from the mountains, Dwight learns that the first member of his crew has succumbed to radiation sickness. The end is near, and civilians begin to collect their prescription suicide pills. Dwight's crew requests to die at home, and he notifies Moira that he'll soon be leaving. Meanwhile, Julian prepares to die by carbon monoxide poisoning, revving the engine of his Ferrari in a closed garage. Dwight and Moira share their final embrace on the docks, knowing it is their last moment together. The audience's last view of Moira shows her watching the sawfish slowly submerge under the water. In the novel, she is described watching the departure from her car before taking her suicide pill. Meanwhile, Mary and Peter lay down in bed and reminisce of the first time they met, on the beach. If you'd yet to feel saddened by the fate awaiting the film's main characters, I guarantee this scene will draw out a tear or two. It is a haunting moment, superbly acted by Perkins and Anderson, as the couple resign to the fact that their short lives are over and ask God to forgive them for mercy killing their child.
God, forgive us.
The final shots of On the Beach were filmed in Melbourne on an early Sunday morning and showcase the empty city streets devoid of all life. The last thing the audience sees is a Salvation Army street banner which reads, "There is still time, brother." To maximize the impact of the film's strong anti-nuclear messaging, On the Beach received significant advanced publicity in various countries. However, despite an extensive marketing campaign culminating in a simultaneous global premiere, On the Beach made a $700,000 loss at the box office. Not only did the film's publicity fail to equate to box office success, but the controversial themes explored in On the Beach attracted the attention of the United States government. This is recounted in a brilliant article by Mick Broderick titled "Fallout on the Beach." Following the horrific bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, post-war cinema exploring the effects of radiation had taken the form of atomic mutants, as seen in Godzilla, Them, It Came From Beneath the Sea, and Attack of the Crab Monsters. Whilst On the Beach is not wholly accurate in its depiction of nuclear fallout, the concept of a nuclear winter causing prolonged global cooling had not yet been hypothesized. It was the first major film to explore the human aftermath of a global atomic crisis. This worried the Eisenhower administration, who feared the film may heighten anti-nuclear sentiment and affect the country's civil defense program. Thus, having already denied Kramer access to a nuclear submarine during pre-production of On the Beach, ahead of the film's release in December 1959, a smear campaign was launched by the Pentagon in the attempt to undermine the film's credibility. This included an info guide published by the United States Information Agency, designed to help diplomatic posts navigate questions and comments raised by the film. The guide acquires a somewhat condescending tone, reading, "The film, which is highly fictionalized and contains scientific inaccuracies, raises once again the general question of what is to be done about nuclear weapons." While recognizing that little can be done to affect the film's impact on foreign audiences, we believe the following points may be useful in private discussions with government officials or opinion leaders. 1. Though fictional from the scientific viewpoint, the film will take most viewers through a strong emotional experience. 2. It will be unfortunate if the scientific inaccuracies of the film mislead people and drive them to pressure for ban-the-bomb type solutions. 3. The film grossly misconstrues the basic nature of man. The resort to mass suicide is not only unnecessary but wholly fatalistic, misinterpreting the vitality of the human spirit. The third and final assertion incidentally identified a common contemporary criticism of On the Beach. Though it is impossible to ascertain if government intervention had any impact on the film's success, one thing is for certain. A film depicting global annihilation was a tad too depressing for 1950s audiences in the lead-up to Christmas. A review published in Variety magazine on December 31st, 1959, stated that On the Beach is a solid film of considerable emotional, as well as cerebral content, but the fact remains that the final impact is as heavy as a leaden shroud. The spectator is left with the sick feeling that he's had a preview of Armageddon in which all contestants lost. Nevil Shute himself was allegedly so sickened by the film, albeit for different reasons, that he dropped dead a mere month after its release from a stroke. Still, the beauty of the film's idealistic portrayal of a dying world where survivors are united by love was not lost on everyone. A review written by Bosley Crowther for the New York Times said that, "In putting this fanciful but arresting story of Mr. Shute on the screen, Mr. Kramer and his assistants have most forcibly emphasized this point. Life is a beautiful treasure and man should do all he can to save it from annihilation, while there is still time. To this end, he has accomplished some vivid and trenchant images that subtly fill the mind of the viewer with a strong appreciation of his theme. It is these haunting images and relevant themes that have allowed On the Beach to endure into the 21st century beyond the Cold War era. It doesn't take a historian to draw eerie parallels between the vaguely defined nuclear conflict described in On the Beach and the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, a 13-day confrontation between the United States and Soviet Union which brought humankind to the brink of nuclear war. Whilst an atomic crisis was narrowly averted, 60 years later, mankind is still troubled by the possibility of a repeat. In an era marred by conflict and uncertainty, the dystopian vision of On the Beach for a now-past future where humanity has annihilated itself feels sadly as close, if not closer to reality, as it did during the 1950s and 60s. In January 2023, the symbolic doomsday clock was moved to its closest position since 1947, indicating that we are closer than ever to global self-destruction. Numerous reports warn that nuclear weapons pose a growing threat, and let's not forget about the existential implications of climate change. As an Australian-born fan of classical Hollywood cinema who grew up an hour's drive from Melbourne, the legacy of On the Beach has long fascinated me. However, Stanley Kramer's adaptation of Nevil Shute's novel is not just a fun relic for Aussie cinephiles, but a landmark contribution to post-apocalyptic filmmaking. Whilst essentially dismissed as too depressing at the time, there is no denying its enduring cultural relevance as a potent study of the human condition and warning of the danger of nuclear weapons. If you've never watched On the Beach, I recommend giving it a go. And if there's only one thing you take away, let it be that should the worst come to fruition, it's true us Aussies are standing upon the safest ground.